You wake up, and before your feet touch the floor, before the coffee, before the messages, before the world asks anything of you, there's already a voice telling you who you're supposed to be today. Calmer, sharper, more disciplined, more impressive than yesterday. You've been chasing that version of yourself for a long time, and somewhere along the way, you stopped asking a simple question. What if the person you're trying to become is the reason you can't rest? You know this feeling. You set the goal. You picture the version of you who has it together, the one who wakes up early without struggle, who never procrastinates, who is endlessly patient, endlessly focused, endlessly fine. And every night you measure today's you against that picture. You almost always lose, not because you didn't try, but because the target was never a real place. Psychologists have a name for this gap. It's called self-discrepancy, the distance between who you believe you are and who you believe you should be. The psychologist E. Torrey Higgins found something quietly devastating about this gap. It doesn't just make you want to improve, it makes you anxious, ashamed, tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Because your brain doesn't experience "not there yet" as motivation, it experiences it as failure, repeated daily. And here's the part almost no one says out loud. The more idealized that future self becomes, the more punishing the present moment feels. You didn't fail at becoming a better person. You built a version of yourself so far from home that arriving was never the point. Suffering was. So let's be clear about something. You are not lazy. You are not undisciplined. You are not behind. You are a person whose nervous system has been quietly measuring itself against a hologram, and no one can live inside a hologram. Not because they're weak, but because holograms have no weight, no texture, no rest. You were never broken. You were just aiming at a place that doesn't have solid ground. To understand what's happening, it helps to borrow an idea from psychologists Hazel Marcus and Paul Anurias. They called it possible selves, the different versions of you that live in your imagination, the self you fear becoming, the self you hope to become, and the self standing here, right now, reading these words. This is useful. It's how humans plan, grow, imagine. But something goes wrong when the hoped-for self becomes the only self your mind is willing to accept. Think of your identity like a rubber band. One end is anchored in who you actually are today, your energy, your history, your limits. The other end is stretched toward who you wish you were. A little tension is healthy. It pulls you forward. But stretch that band too long for too long, and it doesn't build character. It builds strain. Your brain, sensing constant failure to close that gap, activates the same threat circuitry it would use for danger. Cortisol rises, focus narrows, self-trust erodes. This is why chasing an idealized self so often produces not motivation, but avoidance, numbness, procrastination. Because somewhere underneath, your nervous system has learned trying leads to falling short, and falling short leads to pain. So it stops trying to protect you. That isn't self-sabotage, that's self-preservation, misfiring in a modern world that never told you it was allowed to stop performing. So what do you do with this? Not a system to conquer yourself, a way to come back into the same body you left. First, name the self you've been chasing. Write down, honestly, what that idealized version looks like. Once it's outside your head, it loses some of its power. Psychologists call this cognitive diffusion, separating yourself from a thought instead of living fused inside it. Second, shrink the gap on purpose, not by lowering your worth, by lowering the distance. Ask, what is one small, believable version of progress today? Self-discrepancy theory shows that a narrower gap reduces anxiety almost immediately, not because less is expected of you, but because your nervous system finally sees a path it can walk. Third, replace comparison with continuity. Instead of asking, am I who I should be? Ask, am I slightly more myself than I was a year ago? This shifts your brain out of threat-based evaluation and into what researchers call self-concordant motivation, goals that grow from your own values, not from an image you're afraid of failing. Fourth, let rest be information, not failure. When you stop, your body isn't rebelling against your goals. It's often signaling depletion, what psychologists call ego depletion, the idea that self-regulation draws from a limited daily reserve. Rest isn't the opposite of growth. It's what makes the next effort possible. None of this asks you to want less. It asks you to stop treating the distance between here and there as evidence of who you are. Here's the mental model to carry with you. You are not a finished sculpture failing to match its blueprint. You are the sculptor and the clay at the same time. Every version of you, past, present, imagined, is made of the same material. Growth was never supposed to feel like reaching for someone else. It was supposed to feel like becoming more available to yourself. The person you're trying to become isn't a stranger standing far ahead of you. They're not made of light. They're made of the same clay you're standing in right now, just shaped a little more over time by someone who finally stopped punishing the shape they started with. So tonight, when that voice returns, the one listing everything you still haven't become, you don't have to argue with it. You can just notice it and quietly put down the picture you've been measuring yourself against. You were never behind. You were just carrying a version of yourself that was never meant to be reached, only slowly, patiently grown into. That's not a race. That's just a life, and you're already living it.